Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn as read by Lord Naren White. Well, the days went along, and the river went down between its banks again. And the first thing we done was to bait one of the big hooks with a skinned rabbit and set it and catch a catfish that was as big as a man, being 6 foot 2 inches long and weighed over 200 pounds. We couldn't handle him, of course. He would have flung us into Illinois. We just sat there and watched him rip and tear around till he drowned. We found a brass button in his stomach and a round ball, and lots of rubbish. We split the ball open with the hatchet, and then there was a spool in it. Jim said he'd been there a long time to coat it over, and make a ball of it. It was as big as a fish as was ever catched in the Mississippi, I reckon. Jim said he hadn't ever seen a bigger one. He would have been worth a good deal over at the village. They peddle out such a fish as that by the pound in the market house. Everybody buys some of him. His meat's as white as snow and makes a good fry. And next morning, I said it was getting slow and dull. I wanted to get a stirring up some way. I said I reckoned I would slip over the river and find out what was going on. Jim liked that notion, but he said I must go in the dark and look sharp. Then he studied it over and said, couldn't I put some of them on old things and dress up like a girl? That was a good notion, too. So we shortened up one of the calico gowns, and I turned up my trouser legs to my knees and got into it. Jim hitched it behind with the hooks, and it was a fair fit. I put on the sunbonnet and tied it under my chin, and then for a body to look in and see my face was looking down a joint of stovepipe. Jim said nobody would know me, even in the daytime, hardly. I practiced around all day to get the hang of the things, and by I could do pretty well in them. Only Jim said I didn't walk like a girl, and he said I must quit pulling up my gown to get at my breeches pocket. I took notice and done better. I started up the Illinois shore in the canoe just after dark. I started to cross the town from a little below the ferry landing, and a drift of the current fetched me in at the bottom of the town. I tied up and started along the bank. There was a light burning in a little shanty that hadn't been lived in for a long time, and I wondered who had took the quarters there. I slipped and peeped in at the window. There was a woman about 40-year-old in there knitting by a candle that was on a pine table. I didn't know her face. She was a stranger, for you couldn't start a face in that town that I didn't know. Now this was lucky, because I was weakening. I was getting afraid I had come. People might know my voice and find me out. But if this woman had been in such a little town 2 days, she could tell me all I wanted to know. So I knocked at the door and made up my mind I wouldn't forget I was a girl. Chapter 11. "Come in," says the woman, and I did. She says, "Take a cheer." I done it. She looked me all over with her little shiny eyes and says, "What might your name be?" "Sarah Williams." "Whereabouts you live? In the neighborhood?" "No, in Hookerville, 7 miles below. I've walked all the way, and I'm all tired out." "Hungry too, I reckon. I'll find you something." "No, I ain't hungry. I was so hungry I had to stop 2 miles below here at a farm, so I ain't hungry no more. It's what makes me so late. My mother's down sick, and out of money and everything, and I come to tell my Uncle Abner Moore. He lives at the upper end of the town, she says. I ain't never been here before. Do you know him? No, but I don't know everybody yet. I haven't lived here quite 2 weeks. It's a considerable ways to the upper end of the town. You better stay here all night. Take off your bonnet. No, I says. I'll rest a while, I reckon, and go on. I ain't afeard of the dark. She said she wouldn't let me go by myself, but her husband would be in by and by, maybe in an hour and a half, and she'd send him along with me. Then she got to talking about her husband, and about her relations up the river, and her relations down the river, and about how much better off they used to was, and how they didn't know, but they'd made a mistake coming to our town, instead of letting well alone, and so on, till I was afeard I had made a mistake coming to her to find out what was going on in the town. But by and by she dropped on to Pap and the murder, and then I was pretty willing to let her clatter right along. She told me and Tom Sawyer finding the $6,000, only she got it 10. All about Pap, and what a hard lot he was, and what a hard lot I was. And at last she got down to where I was murdered. I says, "Who done it? We've heard considerable about these things going on down in Hookerville, but we don't know who 'twas that killed Huck Finn." "Well, I reckon there's a right smart chance of people here that'd like to know who killed him. Some think old Finn done it himself." "No. Is that so?" "Most everybody thought it at first. He'll know now how nigh he come to getting lynched. But before they changed around and judged it, he was done by a runaway black named Jim. Why he—" I stopped. I reckoned I better keep still. She run on and never noticed I had put in at all. "The black run off the very night Huck Finn was killed, so there's a reward out for him, $300, and there's a reward out for old Finn too, $200. You see, he come to town the morning after the murder, and told about it, and was out with him on the ferry boat hunt, and right away after he up and left. Before night they wanted to lynch him, but he was gone, you see. Well, next day they found out the black was gone. They found out he hadn't been seen since 10 o'clock the night the murder was done. So then they put it on him, you see. And while they were full of it the next day, back comes old Finn, and went boo-hooing to Judge Thatcher, to get money to hunt for the black all over Illinois with. The judge gave him some. That evening he got drunk, and was around till after midnight, with a couple of mighty hard-looking strangers, and then went off with him. Well, he ain't come back since, and they ain't looking for him back till this thing blows over a little, for people thinks now that he killed his boy and fixed things so folks would think robbers done it, and he'd get Huck's money without having to bother a long time with the lawsuit. People do say it weren't any good to do it. Oh, he's sly, I reckon. If he don't come back for a year, he'll be all right. You can't prove anything on him, you know. Everything will be quieted down then, and he'll walk in Huck's money as easy as nothing." "Yes, I reckon so. I don't see nothing in the way of it. Has anybody Has everybody got thinking the black done it?" "Oh no, not everybody. A good many thinks he done it. But they'll get the black pretty soon now, and maybe they can scare it out of him." Why, are they after him yet?" "Well, you're innocent, ain't you? Does $300 lay around every day for people to pick up? Some folks think the black ain't far from here. I'm one of them, but I ain't talked it round. A few days ago I was talking with an old couple that lives next door in the log shanty, and they happened to say hardly anybody goes to that island over yonder, that they call Jackson's Island. Don't anybody live there?" says I. "No, nobody," says they. I didn't say any more, but I done some thinking. I was pretty near certain. I'd seen smoke over there, about the head of the island.
a day or two before that. So I says to myself, like as not that black's hiding over there anyway, says I. It's worth the trouble to give the place a hunt. I ain't seen any smoke since, so I reckon maybe he's gone, if it was him. But husband's going over to see, him and another man. He was gone up the river, but he got back today, and I told him as soon as he got there 2 hours ago.
I had got so uneasy I couldn't sit still. I had to do something with my hands, so I took up a needle off of the table and went to threading it. My hand shook, and I was making a bad job of it. When the woman stopped talking, I looked up, and she looked at me, pretty curious and smiling a little. I put down the needle and thread and let on to be interested, and I was, too, and says. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.